Salutations, digital world. Welcome back to another Spliced In Later. Coming at you, your regular time of whatever it is that you are listening to me now. If you're listening to me when I drop these episodes, it's a Tuesday in Australia. If you're in another country, I don't know what day it is. But welcome back. It's always good to have you. Always good to get together for the next 20 minutes or so and have a chat about whatever I've decided to talk about. And I am going to talk today about a TV show. Has been a while since I've discussed a TV show. I think not since I did a recollection of British sitcoms have I touched on a show. Maybe I have between now and then. Feel free to point me out if I have made a faux pas. But this show came to me that I wanted to have a quick discussion about it, and in terms of semantics for the unlucky situation of being a show on a network broadcasting, the demands of the public, being a showrunner, right decisions, wrong decisions. Nothing really encompasses a show with that much predicaments like the show I'm about to talk to you about. And I only just remembered it because I went out on the weekend and was speaking with some people, and this show just came up. They'd just been catching it. I believe there was some history that me and my friend had watching this show younger. And as I went away and thought about the show and thought about how much I loved it, I still love it a lot now, but not as much as when I was growing up. I really adored this show. It was one of my absolute favorites. I researched it. I watched episodes over and over again. I took note of every character, every production detail, everything that was going on. And through all the trials and tribulations of this show, with the behind the scenes dramas, with the production dramas, with the ratings, the fans, everything, I was hooked all the way from 2006 to 2010. So thinking about that and how much it was really bringing up in me, I thought, hey, I've got a podcast. Why don't I talk about it? So here we go. I'm about to take you back to 2006, refresh your memories. Perhaps you were a fan of this show. Perhaps you still are a fan of this show. Perhaps you've never heard of this show, but you've heard of rumblings about it and issues and whatever may have occurred. But today, we're going to be talking about my much-loved Heroes. That's right. It's just called Heroes, created by Tim Kring, broadcast from 2006 to 2010. Now for me, Heroes started coming out around a time where I was really just getting into all sorts of movie and TV shows, but it was early days in that, as you may have guessed listening to my podcast, I have a soft spot for superpowers, superheroes, super anything. Perhaps you've listened to my top 10s. Perhaps you've heard me talk about the same Marvel movies over and over again. Well, Heroes came out around a time where these movies had not really taken the hold in the entertainment industry that it has now. 2006, we'd had a couple of Spider-Man movies, a couple of X-Men movies, assorted standalone movies for other Marvel movies here and there, which had not really been too successful. On the DC side, plenty of Superman and Batman movies, but that was about it. In fact, on television, I believe the only other superhero show that was probably really prominent would have been Smallville. Nothing else really jumps to mind. I'm sure there was probably stuff. But for me, I also didn't get into Smallville until 6 seasons, which means I didn't watch Smallville till after I started on Heroes. Heroes was my first superhero-y, superpowered sort of show. And right from the get-go, I was hooked. What was so appealing to me about Heroes was its broad scope. There were so many main characters across multiple places across the planet, each with their own storyline, their own personal dramas, their own arcs, their own goals they needed to achieve, while at the same time also developing very different powers from each other, abilities, skills, existing in the real world. So it wasn't a made-up place like Gotham City or Metropolis, and it wasn't a New York City where people were aware of peoples with powers. It was just an everyday, normal world. But amongst all the normal people were all these people that were getting extraordinary abilities, which I thought was very intriguing. Essentially, you could say that it was the X-Men on TV, because it was natural occurrences for people having their powers. No one was bitten by a radioactive spider or sent from another planet. People just woke up one day and found out they could fly, or turn invisible, or heal from any wound, or teleport across space and time. And what happened was they had to learn how to deal with these things. How were they going to do it? Were they going to believe they were comic book superheroes and try and save the world? Were they horrified by their abilities and regress into personal trauma to get away from it? Did they just want to pretend nothing had happened? Did they think they were freaks? a whole bunch of trials and tribulations that these characters went through. And they were spread out across the world, yet somehow there was always one big defining feature that was bringing everybody together. Everybody was interacting with each other, some more often than others, but no one storyline felt like it wasn't part of a larger whole of this ultimate goal of Heroes, which was one of our characters who could see the future and paint it, albeit when they were extremely high, had seen that there was a giant explosion that was going to occur in New York City. No one knew why it was going to happen. No one knew when it was going to happen. Everybody had different clues as to the eventual result of this explosion. And it was how everybody was reacting to that. Some people decided they were going to save the world. Others decided to pretend it didn't happen. Now, these were very unique characters, and I'm going to fire off a couple to you, some that I think are the most important from the show. Some were my favorites, some not so much. They're just important, but each very different stories, very different powers, which made for very interesting storytelling. Every episode you tuned in, you didn't know exactly who you were going to check in with. Some you checked in with more than others. Some disappeared for episodes at a time, but then came back in truly important ways. But there were always a core group that seemed to be holding the show together, in my opinion, and with some really great characters created by Tim Kring and the people behind Heroes. So here's a couple for you, just right off the bat. You've got what is arguably our main character, Peter, based in New York, who knows he is special and knows there's something different about him, but can't seem to work out exactly what it is. And his abilities are a unique mystery that you learn about as you go on through the show. Alongside him is his brother Nathan, whereas Peter is empathetic to people and wants to make a difference and change the world. Nathan is the exact opposite of him. He also wants to change the world, but albeit by being famous and being remembered and taking on politics and that sort of thing. Over in Texas, you have Claire, a cheerleader who discovers that no matter what she does, she can heal from anything. She throws herself off water towers. She steps in front of cars. She puts her hands in a blender. It's grisly, gross stuff, but every single time she manages to just put herself back together. Over in Tokyo, Japan is arguably our favorite, best character in Heroes, Hiro Nakamura, who is an office drone who reads comic books but discovers that when he concentrates really hard, he can stop time and also teleport across space anywhere in the world. And he's very excited about this power and what it means for him. Alongside him is my favorite character, Ando, who has no powers at all and just doesn't understand what the hell is going on around him. You have Matt Parkman, who's a police officer who discovers he can read minds, which both helps and hinders his job as a police officer and his personal life with his wife. We also have Isaac Mendez, a painter who can paint really well when he's completely up there on heroin, but paints the future. He can see images of the future and paints them, which obviously, as mentioned earlier, is what launches a lot of our story. You also have Nikki, who has super strength, but is only able to access this super strength due to a split personality. So her more demented other half is the one that can use her super strength. She also has an ex-con husband who can walk through walls, and a young son who seems to have a really good relationship with computers. I wonder what power that could be. I guess it's talk to computers. Alongside everyone, there is Dr. Mahinda Suresh coming across from India, who is researching people with powers and evolution, and not a lot of people believe in his research is legit. He's carrying it on from his father, and his job is to go out and try and find all these people, catalog them, study from them. But he's a good guy. He has a heart of gold. He just wants to learn. He's not out for any nefarious purpose. As all these different people across all the world start to come across these powers and go on adventures and personal character arcs to evolve and grow with them, there are also these underlying mysteries that are hovering over everybody, specifically besides the big bomb that's going to destroy New York City. There's also a strange serial killer out there known only as Sylar, who tracks people with powers and murders them horrifically, taking off their heads and removing their brains, who also seems to have access to an unlimited amount of powers. There's a mysterious mobster man called Mr. Lindemann, who seems to know everybody and has access to everybody, and he has some nefarious scheme of his own. And a nameless company, which is tracking these people with powers, who everybody starts to realize is related to in some way or another, specifically Claire, whose dad seems to be a part of this sinister organization. Great story arc for this first season. I would say that the first season is one of the best shows on television, the best stories that you will see. It has come perfect from start to finish. Everything that happens to everybody, Peter, Matt, Hiro, Nikki, it all comes together for this big climactic mission to stop the explosion in New York and essentially save the world. I mean, you've got people traveling in time. They've seen futures where if they don't succeed in stopping these events that are happening, the whole world's just going to fall to shit. Great special effects, great directing, great music. The theme for Heroes is hauntingly beautiful. I cannot recommend it enough. I believe it's done by someone called Shankar, I think. I probably got it wrong, but it's just lovely to hear. It's good ambient noise to work to while you're working along in an office or something. It's just lovely and soothing, but also gives you a feeling of wonder and excitement and bewilderment. All sorts of crazy, great actors are in here as well that show up at certain points in time. Christopher Eccleston, George Takei, Richard Roundtree, Eric Roberts, Malcolm McDowell. I've recommended this show to quite a few different people. In many cases, I have made people sit down and watch it with me, family members, friends. And for the most part, everybody has been intrigued and interested to continue on with the show after the first episode. And by around episode 9, when things really start to kick off, they're hooked and they can't wait to get to the end of the season. Season 1 of Heroes, fantastic. However, while Heroes was once famous for its quality television and for great storytelling, great action, great character development, moving along from season 1, things very slowly went downhill. And I can look back on it now with my eyes taken off the blinders of my love for the show and accept that it did happen, and it's okay to accept that it did happen. There are a number of reasons why it did, and I think Heroes is a prime example, but this is happening for a lot of shows out there. There are underlying factors which contribute to a show's decline in quality, and I'm going to list a couple of them for you now. Number 1, most importantly, Heroes, while pitched to the network NBC as a continuing show, was not going to continue focusing on these specific characters season to season. Season 1, called Genesis, essentially, the story of Peter, Hiro, Claire, Matt, Nikki, Sila, everybody was contained to this one season. The season was going to end with their story arcs finished, done, finito. When we move on to season 2, a whole new bunch of characters, a whole new bunch of powers, a whole different set of locations, threats to stop, intrigue, mysteries to answer was supposed to be introduced. In a sense, an anthology series, much like what we have now with Black Mirror and, well, back in the past we had The Twilight Zone, having different stories with different characters for different episodes. You don't need to be following the same people on and on and on. You meet new people, you get new mysteries. It keeps the shows feeling fresh and unique and interesting. But Heroes hit such a high soppy popularity, and mainly because everybody loved the characters that they had introduced to in the first season of Heroes, that when season 2 of Heroes was moving forward, basically it was, you have to keep these characters, you have to keep them going, because that's why people will watch season 2. They want to see more of Hiro, they want to see more of the company, they want to see more of Sila killing people, they want to see what more powers can be given to these specific set of characters and individuals. Which, fine if you have a plan for that. But unfortunately, and this brings us to the main issue with Heroes and with a lot of network shows, is the reactionary response of the producers behind the scenes. They make a show, when they start off in the beginning, they know what they want and they give it to you. But then when they get further on and they hear the audience feedback and what people want, they tend to disregard their vision or their ideas to appease the fans, to give them what they want, or to do what they think will bring in more ratings, better reviews, more money, whatever the case may be. So we've already got up to a bad start by going, I'm going to make an anthology show called Heroes about different characters in different seasons. Get to the end of the first season. Never mind, I'm just going to do a season 2 with these same characters, but in a different situation. I don't know what that is, but I've got to do it. And I've got to do it in about 4 months because season 2 has to start immediately. There's more episodes to do. More episodes have been ordered. Got to keep the quality content coming. Got to keep it coming quickly, fast. Fine. Some shows sink, some shows swim. I think, from what I saw of the start of Hero Season 2, while not quite as good, the formula and the essence was there for the shows to still be good. However, 2007 to 8 is the infamous writer's strike in America, where lots of productions went on strike for pay reasons, whatever the case may be. Nearly every show across the United States network television schedule was shut down early. In many cases, quickly, without warning. Just enough warning that they could wind down their shows, but nowhere tell the season arc stories that they wanted to tell. In some cases, like a police procedural or whatever, something like that, where it's just a new story every week and there's no real underlying story that's going episode to episode across the whole season, easy enough to do. For a show like Heroes had got up to episode 11 of an ordered 25 before it had to shut down production because it just weren't working. The strike was going on and it wasn't going to end anytime soon. For season 1 of Heroes, by episode 11, you only just get a big clue about the big season mystery of the explosion in New York. And it's exciting to get that clue because you know that in a couple weeks, it will come back on and you'll get more information. So season 2, it has its slow burn at the start. A lot of our characters disappear for the first couple episodes. They take their time introducing them back in. They do introduce some new characters, some new arcs to keep the show fresh and exciting. And everything is building up again to a point where by about episode 11, halfway through the season, they can drop some big knowledge bombs and continue on with their planned story. Can't do it. We're not going to be back for the next 8 months. We have to wrap the story up for this season and start with a brand new one when we get back next season. Which means when you wrapped up season 2, not only did it feel like nothing had really happened because of the slow burn, it felt like there wasn't a proper resolution to what you got because nothing had really been established. And by the time you came back for season 3, 8 months later, it was a whole other thing. And a lot of what happened in season 2, you had to wonder, was even relevant. But, and here's the kicker, the complaints because of that were a result of the writer's strike. But production behind Hero seemed to think, okay, people didn't like how season 2 felt. Let's not take into account the writer's strike. Let's take into account people's complaints. Complaints about the writer's strike, essentially. The show is too slow to get to the point. The show isn't exciting. The show doesn't have enough powers, action. In the first few episodes, we need to get to all of that immediately, not allow the slow burn. The slow burn, which I might add, made the first season of Heroes so good. So by the time you got to season 3, again having to come with a whole new plan and a whole new story for these specific characters, again, ideas that had not even been thought of a year ago, whereas I imagined for the first season of Heroes this stuff was planned out in advance. You jumped right into season 3 with action, explosions, the characters having to do the same thing again, stop a apocalyptic event that's coming, have to negotiate the company, have to weasel around Sila, have to encounter new people with new powers. Season 3 is split up into 2 volumes, meaning 2 separate storylines, meaning almost like season 2, very short story, quick to get to the end, to the exciting point, but with less of the slow burn that you get for season 2 because they have to get to that point quickly because they know they are, and they're moving on to a whole new story for the second half of season 3, leading to an overall very messy, very confusing show where characters were making decisions that did not fit the personalities that had been established for them. Allegiances were shifted. People ended up where they should never have really been. But that's the point. That's what happens when you get to a point in a show where you fulfilled all the arcs your characters had in their very first season. But you have to keep doing it because the network demands more episodes. You have to keep doing it for season after season, regardless of whether you have a good story or not. So at the point where you get to Heroes' infamous 4th season, where you have no idea what's going on, you can't follow anything that's happening, your favorite characters are disappearing for episodes at a time because they just can't think of anything for them to do. That's a season length worth of story, essentially. So there you go. Heroes is a perfect example of that. And it's happening with a lot of shows. With the pandemic that just happened recently, a lot of shows were suddenly had to put the brakes on because they weren't allowed to do production anymore. So a lot of shows that do the same sort of season-long progression like Heroes, The Flash, Arrow, mostly superhero shows, have now had to end their seasons without actually ending the storylines that they are. And right now, it's a scramble to see how they're going to pick up the stories when they go next season. Some shows are talking about just ditching the end of their story that we're telling entirely, jumping into the next one, while also dealing with actors who have decided to leave shows or have been fired from shows, thereby having to negotiate a way for them to have left the show while still telling a story. It's a very messy affair, isn't it? When recommending Heroes to people, I will say, as this discussion has progressed, it's not that I'm complaining about the way Heroes got or the quality of the show or whatever like that. As long as Heroes was on show as a fan, I enjoyed it. And I do go back and watch it all again from start to finish. But it is a little frustrating that there was a potential for Heroes to be left alone and be good on its own with the original plans that were entitled to them. But because of network television, where it's just renewing a season again and again and again because the ratings come in, whether they should or not, at the expense of the quality of just knowing when to step back and go, no, we've told our piece. The perfect example of this is Watchmen. Watchmen was just on HBO. It was picked up as an idea for being many season stories, but the guy who was the showrunner for the first season, Damon Lindelof, he only had an idea for one season, and he told it. And when it finished, he immediately stepped down and said, if you want to keep making Watchmen, that's fine, but I've told my story. Everything that I wanted to do with these characters has been told. It is a proper story from start to finish. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Critically acclaimed, everybody has enjoyed it, everybody has loved it. Leave it alone, I say. It's a good limited series. If you want to do something with it, I can't stop you, but I will not help you do it. And I just bought Watchmen on DVD, and it very happily does not say season 1 on the front. It says limited series, which means it's just something nice you can pop in, watch from start to finish, enjoy it completely, and then move on. If Heroes had allowed to be a limited series for its first season, if it had moved on and done something different for its second season as planned, who can say? I imagine it would have been great quality all the way through, but at the very least, that first limited series for Heroes would have been great on its own and not lumbered with the, not stigma, but downhill, sad qualityness, confusion, whatever, of pushing for more and more heroes at the expense of the story itself. In conclusion, though, I have been going back and watching the first season of Heroes, getting ready to talk about it, and by talking about it on the weekend, and I'm having an absolute great time. If you have not seen Heroes, I absolutely recommend it. Specifically the first season, obviously, but it is a very great piece of television, very intriguing, very interesting. I love shows with a large ensemble group of characters, each doing their different thing. I'm that nutty person that likes to keep track of different characters, no matter how important they are. You watch Game of Thrones and I'm more excited to hear about the background Night's Watchman Ed than I am about Jon Snow. Or I want to know what Podrick Payne's up to more than Brienne of Tarth. Heroes is appetizing to me in that sense. There are so many characters, so many stories, so many places, all popping up in different areas. I'm like Charlie from that GIF, and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with Pepe Silva, but instead it's a map of heroes' connections. And it's just a lot of fun, and I can't recommend it enough. And if you want to keep going on and watch the rest of it, you have been warned. I do think you may enjoy it, you may not. Everyone has their own opinion. But don't let it become a Game of Thrones situation. Game of Thrones, great show, loved it. However, with Season 8 and the way it was, the quality, the disappointment that I had, it's very hard now to go back and watch Game of Thrones because that Season 8 is looming over me so much. I don't want it to taint my overall enjoyment of the Game of Thrones show, but it's also hard because I know if I watch Game of Thrones, I'm going to have to then watch Season 8, and I was so disappointed by it that it's kind of tainted the whole show for me. That may happen if you watch the rest of Heroes, but it's a risk you're just going to have to take if you want to see it all. My advice is try not to let it happen. I try with Game of Thrones not to let Season 8 taint it, and with Heroes, I try not to let the whole madness of what the show became taint that glorious first season. So there we are. Thank you again for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed our little chat. I hope if you've watched Heroes in the past, you're intrigued to go back and watch it again. I hope so many people out there cherish it as much as I do. And maybe if you haven't seen it and you're looking for a new show, this might be something to look into. I hope you give it a try because it's good television, good characters. Hero, Ando, Peter, Matt, Sila, everybody. Great bunch of characters, great powers, great need to fill that absence of superhero stuff while there is no superhero movies at the theater. It's classic TV, well, not classic, it's 2006, but it's from a different time. And honestly, it's a great ride from episode 1 to 23 of season 1. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll be back next week for something else. Don't know what it'll be, but you'll have to check in next week, and then I'll tell you what it is once I also know myself. But as always, I love and appreciate you. As always, you've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.